This is East Carolina Defense Coordinator Blake Harrell, and you're listening to the Sports Objective, the official unofficial podcast of the Pirates.
As we sit here on July 2nd, we're exactly 2 months from the season opener as East Carolina will take on in-state foe App State at Bank of America Stadium in Charlotte on September 2nd. And right now, to preview that matchup with the Mountaineers, we're very excited to welcome back to the program App State's six-year play-by-play voice, Adam Witten. Adam, how's your summer going?
It's going well. And, you know, we sit here today, and you mentioned 2 months away. 62 days to be exact until we kick it off in Charlotte. Not only that, but we're getting all these reports of full capacity, getting back to the atmosphere that we all know and love about college football. And so that makes me really enjoy my summer because A, it's summer break and you get to do a lot of fun stuff, but every day brings you that much closer to the start of the season. And so it's all good things, my man. Happy to be here.
Yeah, no doubt. It's nice to get back to some sense of normalcy, as you're saying. And you take a look at this matchup, even though these are in-state foes, obviously they've only met 2 times since 1979. This will be the third. Back in the Southern Conference days, these teams played regularly. And back prior to that, going back, both of these programs or schools, I should say, began as teacher training schools, teacher producing institutions, and they played a lot there early on, and App State really dominated 17 out of their first 20, and then toward the tail end when Pat Dye was at East Carolina, the Pirates on the better side of things. But just take a look at this matchup, not specifically, but just this series in general, and what are your thoughts on these two programs getting together?
It makes so much sense for these two schools to play so often because they are obviously in-state opponents, and because of the periods of success that each has had at different times at the G5 level. App is right there and ECU is trying to get back there, but we all know that from its history, ECU has a proud tradition and is capable and has been at the top tier of G5 football and has won games against in-state P5 schools like NC State and North Carolina, and App has pulled off the same thing back in 2019. So from that standpoint, having two programs that are football powers that have amazing fan bases from opposite ends of the state, it's so great that it's not just a one-off game that we're getting on the schedule like those two meetings that you mentioned since 1979, 2009, 2012, both games played at Dowdy-Ficklin, but now you actually have a series in place. We've got this game in Charlotte, you've got 2 at Dowdy-Ficklin, and then 1 sandwiched in the middle there in Boone at Kid Brewer. And so it's now you're all of a sudden developing it as more of a rivalry, which for App State, I think anytime you can have more of these games, especially at G5 level and programs that have a lot of similarities between each other, I just think it's so good for the sport, for the fan bases, for the state of North Carolina college football. So I'm glad that we're doing this and glad that we're finally arriving at game 1. I went to school at App. I'm an alum, and I've been calling games. As you mentioned, this will be my 6th season, but I've never seen App and ECU play each other. Those 2 meetings since 1979. I wasn't born in 1979, so I didn't see any of the games back then. The 2009 and 2012 game, I wasn't around. I graduated in 2004. App and ECU never played while I was in school, and I didn't come back to be around the program on a consistent basis until 2016. So this will be my first experience in seeing this matchup. I've been to a game at Dowdy-Ficklin for ECU. I've been obviously to several games at Kid Brewer for App State, so I know what the fan bases are and what the proud tradition is like. But to see them clash with one another, it will be a first for me, and I can't wait to see it in just 62 days.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree with you. And this is a series that makes too much sense not to play for all the reasons that you mentioned. That 2009 game, unfortunately, Monty Edwards had the lawnmower incident in the summer, and
Right.
then Pirates jumped out to a huge lead, but then the Mountaineers came roaring back behind Traveris Cadet, doing his best to pick up Armani Edwards slack. And then that 2012 game, when the Mountaineers were still, of course, a member of the FCS. Um, that was only a 1-point ball game, mid to late third quarter, and Lance Ray for East Carolina returned a kickoff for a touchdown that kind of swung the momentum in the Pirates' favor, and they pulled away in the fourth quarter. But this is the first meeting since both programs have been in FBS, and just talk about some of the transitions that have gone on in recent years at App State. On the surface, you see, Coach Satterfield had been there in 18. Eli Drinkwitz and everything he accomplished in that one season when he inherited a very good situation, to say the least. And then obviously Coach Clark taking over for the bowl game, and then currently still the head coach. But it looks like there's been a lot of change, and I guess in a sense there has. But this is a program that down through the years has had so much continuity. It was just that Eli Drinkwitz season of 2019 that kind of makes it look more extreme than what it is, in my opinion.
Yeah, it really is amazing that App has maintained this level of success despite the transitional phase that you're kind of talking about there. App has won 63 games over the last 6 seasons, and only 4 other programs have won more games over the last 6 years: Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, and Oklahoma. And they've gone through 3 head coaches during that span. And in fact, between the end of the 2018 season and the end of the 2019 season, almost a span of like 1 calendar year, they had 4 different people as the head coach of a football game. Scott Satterfield in 2018 was the head coach for the Sun Belt Championship game in early December. He gets the Louisville job right after that. Mark Ivey, who is now on his staff at Louisville, Mark Ivey was the interim head coach for the bowl game in New Orleans in mid-December. Eli Drinkwitz is named the head coach just before the bowl game, but doesn't coach the bowl game. So he takes over as head coach in September of the 2019 season. And then in a similar way, he gets hired at Missouri right after the 2019 Sun Belt Championship game. Sean Clark gets named the head coach before the bowl game and serves as the permanent head coach for the 2019 New Orleans Bowl. So in just over a year, you had 4 different people serving as the head coach of a football game for Appalachian State, yet they still maintain this success of winning 9, 10, 11 games every season, or in the case of 2019, 13 games, winning a bowl game every year, winning 2 conference championship games and 4 Sun Belt titles overall during that 6-year span. It really is remarkable, and I think it just goes to show that it's an overused word, but it really makes a difference in this sport, which is culture. If you have that culture embedded into your program and it permeates through your locker room, you can withstand that transition. And as long as you're bringing in the right people to lead the program as coaches, as support staff, then you can maintain that culture. And App has been able to do that through some very difficult coaching transitions, because we've seen it go the other way. When a coach leaves for a P5 job and you don't get it right with something that's going to maintain that culture of winning, it can go south in a hurry, and you have to build it back. And thankfully, because of the decisions and the planning and being ready for these opportunities, like Doug Gillen, the AD, and Sean Clark and the other members of the administration, being ready to take on these moments of transition has allowed them to maintain that success. And they're poised to stay at the top of the Sun Belt and be a team that will be considered for the top 25 all year long. They've got that ability this year, even though they've gone through quite a roller coaster over the last couple of seasons. They're still right there at the top at this level.
You talk about Sean Clark. He obviously was an offensive lineman under Jerry Moore back in the mid-90s, played on that team in 1995 that went undefeated in the regular season, if I'm not mistaken. And He obviously coached there as well under Coach Sat. So he's a guy that gets it. And he was I think largely the favorite to take over for Eli Drinkwitz when that move came about.
Yeah, yeah, it's funny. It was kind of to summarize the way that people felt about what to do with the head coaching position after Eli Drinkwitz left. It was basically hire Coach Clark or we riot. That was the sentiment coming through the entire locker room, throughout the fan base. They knew that Sean Clark was the right person for the job because of all the things that you mentioned. You know, he's an alum, which is a big deal. He played for Jerry Moore, who's obviously a legendary coach in college football. And he came on as an assistant in 2016, the same year that I started back, coaching offensive line, building relationships, a tireless and very good recruiter, understands offense, understands the foundation of what wins football games. But the reality is that people just really love him. They love him. They respect him. He loves his players. He treats everybody with respect and truly cares about each and every person in that locker room. And all you have to do is just, you know, if you can go back and do a Twitter search and search Sean Clark right around early December of 2019 after Eli Drinkwitz left for Missouri, you'll see just the outpouring of support and the campaigning that was happening from current players, former players, anybody that knew Sean Clark. They all knew that he was the right guy for the job. And I think that just speaks volumes about the way that he can lead a program and the way that there's that mutual care and respect between coach and player.
2020, what a year that was for Coach Clark to get his first year as the head coach, and just 9-3, 6-2, and obviously that's a tremendous result. But the bar has been set so high. Just talk about the 2020 season. There weren't, or it wasn't, excuse me, all smooth sailing in terms of COVID, but the Mountaineers still were able to get 12 games in.
Yeah, able to get 12 games in and win 9 of them. You know, go 9-3, win another bowl game. And so, you know, you didn't win the conference championship, which is the ultimate goal. And so it wasn't a season that they would deem a huge success. But all things considered, having your first full season as a head coach be in the middle of a pandemic, App did have to shut it down for a couple of weeks in late September. And yeah, I mean, there were so many things that every program got thrown their way. You know, App did not have its full roster of skill position and weapons on offense. Corey Sutton, their top receiver, did not play in 2020. He's going to be back in 2021, which makes a big difference for the offense. You know, you had another new offensive coordinator coming into the fold. So you had some new things happening around the program, along with everything that we dealt with COVID, that just made it an unusual season. And so I think you do the best you can with something like that. And at the end of the day, if you win 9 games in a bowl game, I think that's pretty admirable for what that program went through. And any team that had success in 2020, you know, I think you really just tip your cap and you try not to complain about the things you didn't accomplish, and be happy and thankful that, yeah, you got 12 games in, you won 9 of them, you got to celebrate with a bowl win at the end of the season. You know, everybody came out of it relatively healthy. Yes, there were some people that contracted COVID, but there weren't any serious effects from it. And that's really the most important part of all of that. So yeah, 2020, we're glad it's over with. We have absolutely turned the page to 2021. But when you do take a chance to think back on it, I think you just have to appreciate what that team accomplished.
Let's hone in on the Mountaineers offensively. You talked about the coordinator change prior to Coach Clark's first season. Obviously, Tony Peterson was the coordinator a season ago. He's moved on to Illinois. Then you have Coach Ponce coming back from Louisville, who's certainly no stranger to App State, as he had been on Scott Satterfield's staff. So just talk about that, and then we'll dive into some of the personnel.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so excited to have Frank Ponce back as the offensive coordinator this year. He's a great person. First of all, you know, he was on staff when I came back, and he was the co-offensive coordinator, coaching the quarterbacks, being kind of the person who was dictating things in the passing game from the booth up top during games. But Now he comes back as an actual offensive coordinator, really getting control of that offense, which is a big reason why he came back. He loves App, he loves Boone, but to be able to come in and actually take on a role of offensive coordinator in its truest sense of the position was very attractive to him. And he and Coach Clark worked together so well. So I'm really excited to have Coach Ponce back. But, you just look at his track record, especially at App State. When he was coaching with Scott Satterfield, Taylor Lamb was setting all kinds of records and setting the world on fire as the quarterback. He was the quarterback coach in 2018 when Zach Thomas was a first-year starter and came out of the gates and just surprised everybody and impressed everybody with the way he started his first year as a starter, because he had someone like Frank Ponce, helping him to grow into the position, be ready to take the stage right out of the gate with that first game against Penn State in 2018. And then, this isn't a knock on anybody else, but when you go from working with Satterfield and Ponce, and now you've got Coach Drinkwitz, and then you've got Tony Peterson, when you change coaches, there's going to be an adjustment every time. And so that was tough for Zach in his 3 years as a starter to have 3 different quarterback coaches and 3 different offensive coordinators. So now Frank Ponce comes in, he gets a chance to come back and put his fingerprints back on the offense, the way he did so well when he was an assistant coach and kind of controlling the passing game. And he gets a chance to work with Chase Bryce coming in as a transfer quarterback. And I'm really excited what those two are going to do together and what this offense will look like.
Chase Bryce, 6'3", 235 pounds, obviously began his career at Clemson, then moved on to Duke, now App State. What are the reviews coming out of spring ball? I've heard some very good things at App State, although they took him for a reason, and they knew that his numbers at Duke didn't necessarily indicate the type of quarterback he could be. And just what were the thoughts coming out of spring practice?
Yeah, the reviews were very positive. I did have a chance to actually visit with Frank Ponce after spring ball, and I got a chance to ask him, his thoughts on Chase Bryce. Very, very positive reviews, because he's got all the talent in the world. He really does. And you can see how he ended up at a program like Clemson immediately in his career. And ultimately, though, he got stuck behind some pretty talented guys, some like generational type players at Clemson. So, he moves on to Duke. Unfortunately, things didn't go well there. A lot of turnovers for that offense, but coming in here, he still has the foundation of being an unbelievable talent. And to work with someone as smart and as good with quarterbacks as Frank Ponce, I really think they're going to do some great things together, because he has the attributes to do really impressive things. And the way that our offense is designed at App, that you're not going to put too much pressure on the quarterback, because we are still a run first offense. That's where the foundation lies in terms of how to set the tone of what the offense wants to do. So you combine that with the fact that he has the top 7 receivers basically coming back this year, tons and tons of talent at the receiver position, and a stout ground game to really kind of take the pressure off. I think Chase Bryce is going to allow himself to be very comfortable in this offense, not have to do too much. But when the time arrives, I think they'll find ways to really showcase the unbelievable skills that he has.
Before we talk about some of that, tremendous skill talent that you referenced at running back and wide receiver, and just talk a little about the offensive line. I know you returned some veterans like Hunter and Hodges, but then you also lost some key pieces.
Yeah, that there are some key pieces off of the 2020s team, and really it starts at the center position. Noah Hannon was a 4-year starter. He started game 1 as a true freshman, as a 235-pound center out of high school, starting against the Georgia Bulldogs, and started every game of his career up until the final bowl game. And they're really going to miss him. He was a captain, great leader, and an unbelievably smart player in the middle of that offensive line. So that's the biggest loss up front. But they found a good solution with Bear Hunter moving over to the center position. At least that's what they did during spring ball. It kind of reminds you of back in 2016. They had a really talented offensive lineman named Parker Collins, who, again, leader on the team, very physical, set the tone up front, did not play center, made the move to center in 2016 for his final season. And they're doing something similar with Bear Hunter. Bear Hunter is about as versatile as it comes. He's been recruited to play 3 different positions. He started out, they thought he could be a defensive lineman. Then they thought he could play tight end. Now he moves over to offensive line, which is where he's really found a home at guard. And he'll shift over to center, most likely to start the 2021 season, to really anchor that offensive line. And then over at tackle, you mentioned Cooper Hodges. He's as good as it gets in the Sun Belt. He's a 2-time all-conference guy, just enormous, great guy to have on the edge of your offensive line, and just keeps getting bigger, stronger, and better year after year. So you've got those 2 guys really anchoring the offensive line. And then, yes, you'll have some new starters, but they're not necessarily new faces. Anderson Hardy is the most likely person to take over at an open tackle position that Cole Garrison was at as a starter last year. But toward the end of the season, Anderson Hardy actually became the starter at tackle. So he hasn't started many games, but he has started before. So he's not necessarily a new starter. And then, likely have someone named Damian Daly, who they really like, just couldn't find a spot for him in the starting lineup last year because they were so good up front. He'll probably take over at the position where that Bear Hunter vacates, moving over to center. And then there'll be a position battle for the other guard spot as well, with some really talented young offensive linemen. So I think O-line, yes, there'll be some new names and maybe some shifting around of positions, but still very much a strength of this offense.
This is a program that's really been able to run the football, priding itself on it, no doubt. And you look at Cameron Peoples, Dietrich Harrington, Nate Noel, and then you also have coming over from Notre Dame, Jameer Smith. Just talk about the stable of running backs.
It's really has been a staple of this offense, having deep, talented running backs. Last year they went into the season with 3 guys who all could have been the starting running back in Marcus Williams, Cam Peoples, and Dietrich Harrington. They were all super talented, all could have been a number 1 running back on a lot of programs around the country. But they were all just too talented. And so they tried to split it up as much as they could. And then by the end of the season, because of injuries mostly, Cam Peoples really rises up to be the number 1 guy at running back. And that'll be the way that that's the way it'll stand going into fall camp. Dietrich Harrington is still there, but he's just had so much tough luck related to injuries. And so you just hope that he can get healthy enough to be an impactful guy at running back, because he deserves a full season as a healthy running back, because he's got all the talent in the world, just can't seem to stay healthy for an entire season. And then you mentioned Jameer Smith from Notre Dame. We're really excited to see what he's going to do as well. So depth, talent. Nate Noel really came on as a true freshman and has blazing speed, has a lot of attributes to someone like a Darrington Evans, who's now playing for the Titans. At least they see a little bit of makeup like that in the explosiveness and the versatility of someone like Nate Noel. So Cam Peoples is a big, fast running back, very physical. Nate Noel has lightning speed, smaller, shiftier, tough to wrap your arms around. I think those 2 as a combo, 1 and 2 at running back, Peoples and Noel, could make for a very dangerous duo at running back this year.
No shortage of guys for Chase Bryce to throw the football to. Corey Sutton opted out a season ago, but in his 2 previous years, in 18 and 19, had combined for 85 receptions, 1,400 yards, 17 touchdowns, averaging well over 16 yards per catch. And then you also have guys like Hennigan and Williams that immediately come to mind.
Yeah, I mean, with those 3 guys specifically, Sutton, Hennigan, and Malik Williams, those are 3 of the most talented receivers that have ever been at this program. I mean, Corey Sutton is an amazing number 1 receiver, and they really missed his ability to stretch a defense last year. Thomas Hennigan has that capability, but wasn't healthy for a good portion of the season, was battling a hamstring injury for a good chunk of 2020, and didn't really get healthy, and neither did Jalen Virgil, who's usually the fastest guy in the field no matter who you're playing. Those 2 didn't really get healthy toward the end of the season when they started getting their numbers back up. But between Sutton and Hennigan and Virgil and Malik Williams, great hands, great speed, so much versatility. And then you've got some really good young guys as well. Christian Wells had a couple of big games last year. They really like Christian Horn, who was a true freshman, got in there a little bit. He really is impressed in practice last year. So much depth and experience as well at receiver. So yeah, Chase Bryce should have a lot of options in terms of where to throw the ball, because there is a ton of talent at receiver for this offense.
Shifting over to the defensive side, last year the Mountaineers allowed 20 points per game, 10 starters back from that unit, and just a tremendous at all three levels, 15 interceptions produced a season ago.
Yeah, the defense you mentioned, that's really the important number, is 10 starters back. They didn't have that many starters back last year, but the defense was still outstanding. It's silly good this year in terms of just how talented and the potential of this year's defense. I mean, Demetrius Taylor up front is the most notable guy on the front of that defense. He was a Pro Football Focus preseason All-American, named just a few days ago. And I think they're hoping that he can get back to the form that he showed in 2019 when he had the ability to just literally take over a game as a defensive end. Just turn on the tape from the game that they played against North Carolina in 2019. You can see how he's good enough to take over a game defensively. The speed and ability at linebacker is incredible. DeMarco Jackson and Brendan Harrington really kind of anchor that defense. Trey Cobb and Nick Hampton also extremely talented, fast, can play in coverage, can get to the quarterback, can tackle in space. And really the only loss you had defensively is Shamar Jean-Charles, who was one of the best cornerbacks in the country and got drafted by the Green Bay Packers just a few months ago. So the secondary loses one starter, but tons of talent. And again, you bring 10 starters back, but sometimes the key on defense, especially on the defensive line, is what kind of depth do you bring as well. And as they continue to elevate and have more starters back and getting those reps, now they'll continue to season and grow and strengthen the young players that they've recruited with amazing recruiting classes to get time on the field and keep that defense fresh well into the fourth quarter this year.
You talk about losing a tremendous corner in Jean-Charles. Talk a little about Sean Jolly. I know he's a senior and a tremendous corner in his own right.
Yeah, Sean Jolly, he was an All-American at the end of his sophomore season. 2019, he's a second team All-American, and he's getting all the headlines. Shamar Jean-Charles has an amazing season. Didn't intercept a lot of passes, but led the country in pass breakups, and you just couldn't complete a pass against that guy. And Sean Jolly didn't exactly fall off. It's just that nobody was throwing his way. He's so good, he didn't get in the mix to get interceptions or pass breakups, and people tried to throw away from him, and that didn't work out for them well either, because there's Shamar Jean-Charles breaking up every single pass on the other side. I mean, App was number 1 in the country, or top 5 in the country, in completion percentage against for their defense, and it's because of their amazing secondary, both Jolly and Shamar Jean-Charles. So, this could require someone like a Stephen Jones to step up at the other corner position, because again, they might try to throw away from Sean Jolly because of how good he is on the ball. But Stephen Jones is certainly capable. He's another one of those guys where it's like, yeah, he's probably good enough to start on a lot of teams. Just he's got 2 All-American caliber players starting in front of him. So now this is an opportunity for someone like Stephen Jones to really get his chance as a full-time starter.
Let's talk special teams. The Mountaineers have the luxury of welcoming back Chandler Staten. So tell us about him, and then also what they have at punter.
Yeah, so Chandler Staten comes back as a super senior. He's the Sun Belt's all-time leading scorer. He's certainly capable, got a big leg, did miss some key short kicks last year, and so but still a very reliable kicker as well. They also have a freshman in Michael Hughes that comes in that will challenge for that position as well. So they'll have a good battle for place kicker. And Xavier Sabach is as steady as it comes as punter. So getting him back as a super senior as well will make a big impact in special teams. Sabach has been a steady punter for them for a number of years, and so having him back to really hold down that position and help with field position throughout games will be a big weapon.
Talk about the return aspect. If I recall correctly, I think with punts it had been Thomas Hennigan, at least some.
Yeah, so Thomas Hennigan was the punt returner for 2019, and and they planned on him doing that in 2020, but again, he battled that hamstring injury and wasn't able to get to full speed very often last year, so he didn't get a chance to return punts as much as they would like to. So I think he'll still be the likely guy to return punts this year. You might also see Malik Williams back there as well. So they've got a few options at punt returner. They obviously really like Jalen Virgil as kick returner. He's the fastest guy on the field, and he had probably the biggest play of the season last year when he returned a kickoff at Georgia Southern to give them their first lead in the fourth quarter, 100 yards in Statesboro, and so he's got that capability. If he stays healthy, he'll be another big weapon at kick returner this year.
Yeah, that was an excellent call. I remember watching that game and then coming across your call of that kick return by Jalen Virgil on social media, and certainly gave you goosebumps.
Yeah. I mean, you had to find a way to work social distancing somewhere into a call in 2020. So he was social distancing from the Eagles. That's the way we tried to describe that one.
As we begin to wrap this up, I'm taking a look at the schedule, obviously. Getting things kicked off against East Carolina Thursday night, September 2nd at Bank of America Stadium. But the very next week, September 11th, you go down to Coral Gables to take on the Miami Hurricanes, who came up to Boone a few seasons ago. And then the non-conference slate also features former Southern Conference foe Elon and former Southern Conference foe Marshall.
Yeah, the schedule is really difficult, and it starts off right away, like you mentioned, with the game against ECU on the Thursday night. Miami game is going to be tough. Miami is a team that I think people feel might be a surprise team this year. A lot of it's going to rely on the health of De'Aaron King at quarterback, and they're going to be coming off an Alabama game to start the season before they play App State at home. So it'll be interesting to see how the early part of the season goes for Miami in game one against Bama, and then what they can do against the Mountaineers in week two. It's great to be able to play Elon again. That game brings back a lot of memories for App State fans in the Southern Conference, because at a lot of times they would beat Elon to clinch a Southern Conference championship toward the end of the season. So it'd be good to have the Phoenix up in Boone. The Marshall game, Marshall was a top 25 caliber team early in the season. Then they kind of fell off at the end, but two really good teams. That game is a lot like this ECU series, where it just makes sense for App and Marshall to play as often as they can, because they are close in proximity. They have a history. They're very similar types of programs in terms of the way that they're built and their fan bases. And then, this is probably the best the Sun Belt was. Not probably. I think it's pretty accurate to say that this is the best the Sun Belt has ever been preseason, just in terms of expectations, because you have three top 25 caliber teams in the conference this year, which has never happened to start a season. Coastal Carolina, we all know what they did last year, and they kind of won the hearts of a lot of people across the country. Louisiana is a top 25 caliber team, and then App State as well. I think, when the preseason rankings come out, you could see all three of those teams getting votes, and maybe even two of those three teams in the preseason top 25. So, and App's got to play both of them. They've got to play Louisiana on the road, and they've got Coastal Carolina at home, both midweek games that'll be on national TV. So very, very challenging schedule this year, but a lot of good opportunities to get some quality wins for this program out of conference and in conference.
Yeah, no doubt about it. That certainly jumped out when you looked at mid-October and you see, like you referenced, that trip to Louisiana on a Tuesday night, and then hosting the Chanticleers on the following Wednesday night, and that season finale against Georgia Southern on, I think it was Thanksgiving weekend. That's one that really jumped out as well.
Yeah, I really like that. That was App and Georgia Southern played at the end of the regular season last year, but that's not the way it was designed. That game was postponed because of COVID. That game got postponed to the end of the season, but it was great to be able to have what a lot of programs in college football have, which is your annual rivalry game in the last week of the season. App and Georgia Southern would typically play in late October or early November on a Thursday night. Now they get moved to the last Saturday of the season. It's a great spot for that rivalry to be. So the fact that that gets moved back on the schedule, maybe permanently, is when they'll play every year. I love that change to the schedule, which is, kind of an unintended positive result of what happened last year with some of the scheduling quirks.
Yeah, no doubt about it. That's a game, like you're saying, with all the tradition in that rivalry that is best suited, in my opinion, for the end of the season when there's likely to be quite a bit on the line. As always, Adam, we really appreciate the time. Appreciate you being so generous, spending some of your summer with us. And, when we get to game week in late August, we'd love to have you back on.
Yep, absolutely. Anytime. Love being on with you guys. And thanks for all that you do to highlight college football across this state.
This is East Carolina Hall of Famer and All-American linebacker Jody Schultz, and you are listening to the Sports Objective Podcast, the unofficial podcast of the Pirates.